What is our topic for today? Our topic today is getting started. If you're like me, since you were a little kid, you had stories, you had book ideas floating around in your head, and we need to get them down on paper. We need to start that planning process. And so we're going to start talking about how to get started, how to start writing that book that you know is inside of you. The first thing that we need to talk about, though, when we start talking about books and why haven't we started, are some of the reasons why we don't write, why we don't take that next step forward. I think the biggest fear that people have when it comes to not writing that book that they know is inside of them is a fear of failure, right? And that is, I'm just not going to make it, right? It's not going to be any good. So it's a fear of inadequacy as well, right? No one's going to like it. And so one of the things that you have to do when you get started with writing that book that you want to write is you want to figure out, why are you writing a book? And that really helps to determine a lot of the things that I'm going to be talking about. how to produce a cover that's going to catch eyes and sell copies. How to get professional editing that's going to tighten up your book. How to get copy editing. How do we deal with modern day issues within our books? How do we deal with maps inside of our books and world building and all those things? So I think the answer to these questions will help determine how much time, energy, and money we spend on those other things. And so, most people encounter writing with three different goals. The first one, which is my goal, is I want to sell copies. I want to get my books into as many hands as possible. I want to make money off of my books. I love writing, and I would probably write even if I made very little money off of it, but I want to be a best-selling author. I want to make a lot of money off my books. Okay, and a lot of you probably do too. Number two is you just have a story that you want to write, and it's probably going to be mostly for family and friends. You don't really care about sales. You don't care about how much money you make. If that's you, that's awesome. And it's going to change how we view and take a look at some of these other ideas behind writing a book. And then number three, you want to write a book just for you. A lot of times this is someone who is maybe writing an autobiography, or they're writing an anthology of their family. This is going to be a book that's probably going to, you might make one or two copies. It's going to sit on your coffee table, and people are going to come over and they're going to look through it when they visit. So most of what I'm going to talk about is going to come from that standpoint of we want to make money. We want to be on the Amazon or the USA Today bestseller list. Maybe we want to be full-time authors, whatever the case may be. And don't sell yourself short, and don't tell yourself that you can't make it as an author. Right before COVID hit, I was actually making as much money as an author as I was making as a teacher. Now, COVID kind of screwed that up, and I know a lot of author friends of mine that experienced the same thing, so we're slowly starting to climb back up. But it's definitely doable. Now, are you going to be a millionaire? That's the crapshoot. That's the lottery winner. But can you make money as an author? Sure, especially if you get some good advice from me and from other people and take that advice to heart. You're open to criticism. There's all kinds of things that we have to do in order to get to that place. So getting started. The first thing that you need to do, and what I'm going to talk about today, is you need to have a plan. Okay, so one of the things that I'm going to talk extensively about is planning and outlining. It is so important. We as creative people, we as right-brained people oftentimes feel like planning and outlining and spending time, outlining every chapter, outlining our book stifles our creativity. And I think most authors would tell you from experience that when they actually spend some time outlining and planning their books, it actually helps enhance their creativity, because now you have a framework within which you can work and you can operate. And you're not guessing every single time you open up your computer or you open up your notebook to start writing. You know where you're going, and I think that actually helps our creativity, in my opinion. So the first thing you need to do when we talk about getting started is you need to write down the beginning and the end of your book. That is so important. You need to know how your book's going to open, and I'm not saying that can't change, But we want that pretty solid. We want that pretty solidified. We want it set in stone with a little bit of wiggle room. And we need to know how your book ends, okay? Now, if you're writing fantasy, sci-fi, maybe like crime, drama, mystery type stuff, where it's anthologies, it's series, it's trilogies, it's really important to have an idea of how each book begins and ends, but it's also really important to have an idea of how the whole series begins and ends. Okay, so I would really, really encourage you, open up Microsoft Word, open up Scrivener, open up whatever program you use, and I'm going to talk about those programs as well, but open up whatever program you use, write it down in a notebook, although you want to make sure that it's saved someplace. And so if you're writing in a notebook, we all know that things can happen. Make sure you write it down in several different places. How does the book begin and how does the book end? And I know it might seem silly to some people. Why am I writing this down? This is my book. This is inside my head. Listen, things can happen. We are going in a million different directions and we can forget. We can get sidetracked. I had a great idea and I forgot, right? And so we don't want that to happen. When great ideas pop up into your head, we want to get them down on a piece of paper. We want to write them down so that they're there for us later, because we just know life happens. I'm a father. I'm a husband. I have a full-time job. Things happen and I forget. So make sure you have that plan. Make sure you know how the book begins, how the book ends. The other thing that you want to do is you want to make sure that you have all of your main characters written down. Again, I use a program called Scrivener, and I'm going to create a video that is specifically about Scrivener. I think it's an amazing program. When I switched from Microsoft Word to Scrivener, it changed my life. It changed my writing life. And you can take work that you do in Scrivener and transfer it right back into Word, especially if you're going to upload it to Amazon or something like that. But you need to have an idea of who your main characters are. Again, you can always add to it. You can always take away from it, but have an idea of who your main characters are. Have a general idea of what they look like. What are their character traits? I go through a pretty lengthy process. Again, I'll create a video specifically about characterization and how I view my characters. But oftentimes that includes finding a picture of an actor or an actress or someone I see on the street, and I'm not a creep and take a picture of them without the permission, but something that relates, that looks like that character in my mind, and then I write down a general description of that character. On top of that, getting started to me also includes outlining my whole book. And again, I'm going to create a video completely based on the Michael Hague outlining system. But that's the outlining system I use. There's a lot of different outlining systems, but most of them are generally based on kind of a 3-act system. I use Michael Hague. It's broken up into percentages, and that is, other than writing down the beginning and the end of my book, that is the very first thing I do, is I go through and I plot in what are these key components that happens at 10% of my book, 25%, 50%. And again, this video would be an hour long if I went over it right now, so I'm not going to, but just have a general outline of your story, right? You have a beginning and an end, and then, for right now, you could just write down, a couple pages of what's going to happen in the book, right? And this is for you to read. It's not for anyone else to read. It doesn't have to be grammatically correct. It can be one long run-on sentence if you want. It can be speaking to you. It doesn't matter. This is for you to go back and look at and make sure you know what's going on in your book. And lastly, last video I made, I talked about, you just like, especially if you're getting back in the swing of things, you just have to sit down. You have to sit down and write. You have to create time to sit down and write. If it's 15 minutes a day, it's 15 minutes a day that you weren't writing, right? So as soon as you know the beginning and the end of your story, as soon as you know, as soon as you have an idea of the general outline, and the very next video I'm going to create will be about that Michael Hague writing process, so you can get started with that if that's something that interests you. But as soon as you have all that done, and I really truly believe you need to have all that done, right? There's this saying, not to segue, but there's this saying in the writing community, pantsers versus plotters, right? And I think a lot of us start out as pantsers. We just sit down and write. And there's some really successful authors that still primarily write that way. but I bet if you ask, they have a general idea, they have written down somewhere. They may not do as much plotting as I do, but I bet they sit down and plot out their storyline somewhere. They don't just sit down and just write. They have a general idea of where they're going and things like that. So that's the very next video I'll create, and I'll get that done ASAP, so you guys can start watching that, and hopefully that helps figure that out. But as soon as you get all that done, you need to sit down and write. Now, not to take too much more time, but when you sit down and write, for right now, as you get started, as you're starting your story, don't worry about the little red squiggly lines if you're using Microsoft Word, right? Don't worry about the little blue squiggly lines and the little green squiggly lines. You know, it's not grammatically correct. It's a spelling incorrection, right? You can always go back and change that stuff. Those are things that sidetrack us. I want you to get words down on a page, right? I want you to get your ideas down on paper, because again, we get busy, and if we don't get those ideas down, sometimes we just forget, they go away. And that can be frustrating. It's happened to me. It's probably happened to you. It's probably happened to every author out there at least several times. And it's really frustrating. So my suggestion to you as you get started is you just sit down and write. Just write 15, 30 minutes a day. Right now it's summertime for me. So, you know, if you're watching this in the wintertime, right now is summer break. I'm a teacher. So I have a lot of time to write. You know, I have probably 4 to 5 hours a day to write. I can bang out about 2,000 to 3,000 words in an hour. Some people can do way more than that. Some people, it takes them, they can do way less. It takes them longer. That's just me. So, you know, in a day right now, I can knock out maybe about 10,000 words. So for me, that's really good. If one of my average books is about 150,000 words, so for me, that means I could, without editing and all those things, obviously those things take time, without editing, I could maybe get out a novel in 15 days. Now, we'll see how that goes. It's the very beginning of the summertime. I have kids, I have a family, I have a wife, I have, you know, other obligations. So, you know, that's in a perfect world. But whether you're getting down 10,000 words a day or 500 words a day, you got to sit down and write. And I know I sound like I'm beating a dead horse, but that's something that you got to do. As soon as you get your planning done, as soon as you have your general outline done, you need to just sit down and write. When you do sit down and write, so the last little piece of advice, last bit of information I'm going to give you. When you do sit down and write, find a quiet place, okay? If you're like me, again, I have a family. I have my wife, my 3 kids, and then my mom and my grandmother live with me. So our house is busy, right? So sometimes it's hard to find quiet space. Maybe you need to invest in some noise canceling headphones, find a quiet corner, go find that coffee shop that people, I know that sounds so cliche, but find that coffee shop that people aren't going to. Find a quiet place. You know, maybe you have to wait until everyone's in bed. Maybe you got to wake up a little early so you can write before everyone else wakes up. Whatever the case may be, find a nice quiet place where you can collect your thoughts. You can sit down. You can be with you by yourself and write. So hopefully this helps a little bit. I know I didn't give a whole lot of information in this video. The next subsequent videos, I'm going to be giving more information about how I plot and all those different types of things. But for right now, I just kind of wanted to give a general, hopefully some encouragement. Let's get over some of those fears about not being good enough and not wanting to write because of fear of failure. And let's just sit down. Let's get everything plotted out and let's just sit down and write. So until next time, happy reading, happy writing, and we'll see you soon.